Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of weekly. Well, now it's bi-weekly digest with Fibonacci X because we are meeting every 15 days. So we discuss select deals, we talk about insights, um, and the audience for us is basically twofold. We are trying to reach out to the wider investor community who may be understanding or maybe interested in dissecting some of these deals, and also the founder community because we do discuss insights about themes, about business models, and go to market, right? So these are the two kind of audiences we're trying to address through this video content, right?
So, over the last 15 days, approximately 45 startups have raised funding, with around 33 of them being in the early stage, which we define as pre seed to Series A funding. And approximately nine of them were in the growth stage, which is from Series B to pre IPO stage. And there were two startups which did not, disclose the round which they were raising. So let's start with the first one that we'll be talking about is Policy Bazaar Healthcare Services. So Policy Bazaar raised approximately $218 million in the early stage, since they have just founded the company from General Catalyst and Policy Bazaar FinTech.
So I've been thinking about this, right? So probably in my consulting days, we used to do this exercise with public limited companies, right? So let's say you will sit down with Mr. Adi Godrej and talk about 2030 vision. I'm talking like 15 years before what they want to achieve by 2030. Or you will sit down with Mr. Uday Kotak and think about the future of banking in India, right? As a public limited company, which is PAT positive, uh, Policy Bazaar, right? I'm sure they're thinking of building the organization and the business in different phases, right? Um, when I was thinking about what they're trying to do with the hospital chain is something which is not unique. It has already been tried in US. It has already been tried to an extent with Narayan Hridayalaya Group, Narayana Group in South India, right? So they have their own insurance plans. They have their own hospitals. Obviously, it's for they only deal in heart surgeries. They have a 5,000 bed hospital, I think, in Bangalore. But the closest group, well, the next stop for somebody like Policy Bazaar, and I will share my screen and show you the model also, will be a group in US called Kaizen Permanente, right? Which covers all parts of, including the insurance, testing, hospitals. So you build around the patient and you cover all the touch point, right? So this is the Kaizen model for integrated healthcare, right? So the group provides you doctor, diagnostic, they provide you insurance, they provide you electronic health record, they have pharmacy, and they have a specialist, right? So once you are inside that system, you practically don't need to interact with anyone outside, right? You buy their insurance, you go to their hospital, you get tested in the same labs of the same group. Even if in case you need to see the specialist, that's also within the same hospital of the group, right? Uh, now, because corporate strategy is like chess, right? So you make a move, but you already know what you're going to do. Probably you have thought of what you're going to do if this works out or if it doesn't work out, right? So when I think about Policy Bazaar putting in 800 crores, 900 crores odd into this new entity, this is what they will try to build, right? Not only be the provider for the insurance plan, now they will try to be the doctor. Eventually, they want to be the pharmacist and also do the lab work and the electronic record work within the same entity, right? Um, this is good because we know that the insurance penetration is very low on the health side. Probably not looked at the number recently, but I would say private health insurance should be single digit, low single digit, less than 5% of the total population. So there will be some, tailwinds as most people move to middle income and buy more private health insurance. But for them, to be an integrated player in a country like India will give them a competitive edge because nobody has been able to do it at scale. I know we discussed about Narayana Group, but that's a regional player, right? What they're doing is thinking about six hospitals in NCR and then probably expanding to other top eight, top 10 cities, right? So this is something which I think is how I will imagine their journey to be like in 5 years, 10 years from now, where there are one integrated player, not only the insurance provider, but building the whole ecosystem around the patient, right? Um, as a public limited company, I think it's bold and it's a very good move because, anyways, if you stay in one niche, which is insurance, you are not expanding your TAM. In startup world, this is called expanding your TAM. You start with a niche, but as that business becomes stable, you enter into adjacencies, and now you have practically opened up the whole healthcare market for yourself, right? You're not only doing healthcare insurance, you have hospitals open for your TAM, you have diagnostic, you have pharmacy. So, that the TAM really multiplies, right? So that's why whenever you are thinking about building a business, starting with something niche, which is probably just selling insurance or doing only labs or doing only pharmacy is not a bad idea. Or within that, you can do, a sub segment within pharmacy also. But if you are planning ahead, you need to think once this business is PAT positive, what am I going to do next, right? A lot of time investors ask you this question in the meetings when you go pitch them that your TAM is very small. The the problem with the founders is that they have not thought about different phases of building the business, right? If I was the founder, if I had that pitch deck, then I would always do my homework and think about phase two and phase three, and this is how my TAM is going to expand, right? So from a corporate strategy perspective, I think it's a case study which can be used if it is successful. I am rooting for it. But the model, like I said, already exists in different countries. Different players have already built. So it's a playbook which has already been successful in other geographies, and they're just trying it in India. In India, number of beds available per, in terms of population per thousand people is already very low. So we see this demand going up, especially with NCDs and all the work which we have been doing around NCDs. We see this demand going up, right? Especially for recurring medicine, for blood thinner, blood pressure, diabetics. All those things are going up because the consumption part is going to reflect in the health aspect of the population, right? So I think this is an interesting case study, and let's see how it pans out because building even a single hospital is not an easy project. Now we are talking about deploying money for six hospitals, and this is a very different business from the tech-driven business what they were doing, right? Hospitals operationally are the most challenging business ever built, right? Because the way they are built, first you are dealing with human life. Any single error can have huge liabilities for the whole organization. And just the operational part, right? You go to the front desk and from the front desk, and how do you reach the doctor and what happens and post care and medicine part, right? Maybe there is some couple of episodes also which we can add to the description, which I would recommend. Dr. Shetty from Narayana Group has done a couple of podcasts. If you're interested in what they're doing different, innovative around hospitals.
I think they have had the time and the learning experience through the policy bazaar, the business. I remember when I was renewing, I took a policy bazaar, I took a health policy, AB life insurance from Policy Bazaar, and I got emails from both of them, Policy Bazaar as well as AB life, right? And it was a 1 year policy. The the next year around November, when it was supposed to expire, right? The Policy Bazaar people were very proactive in renewing it. They gave me a call, they sent me an email. The same experience was not there with AB Health Life. I think what they have done is they've tried to understand the consumer, like having the calls, having the process through the Policy Bazaar. They've understood some aspect of the business and the pain points. So that should have helped them to understand. I'm not saying they would have understood how hospitals work, but they would have got a good experience how customers view the policy, how they buy, what's their buying habit. That would have definitely helped them to make a decision to come to the health industry. So definitely they would have learned a lot through the Policy Bazaar medical unit and the policy units. And yeah, I hope the best to them, and I'm sure they'll do a good job because it's not a random set of people coming together. It's they've worked in the industry itself. I'm sure they've talked about doctors. They've set up the system to have a good hospital. So I think they will succeed. I think so. Pretty well.
Yeah. So, and another thing which I wanted to add, this is not a step down subsidiary of the group. This is a totally separate company where they will have an interest. That's how the CEO has portrayed it to the media, right? Again, I will again say that, Kaizen Permanente case study and the Narayana Group, I think everybody can just go about, read about it, and learn more how the integrated healthcare thing works. That's what they're trying to do.
So adding on to your point about how we can, see this business scale as they've just started in this segment. So this is just my personal experience that in the hospitals right now. So for example, if you have a health insurance and you're in a hospital and you are going, or you or someone you know is going through a surgery. So the process of getting that claim after your surgery has been done or it's been completed and you are supposed to be discharged, since it's not of the same company, it takes a lot of time to complete the transaction. But I think if this gets integrated and they're successful, so that time of people leaving, like after their surgery or their treatment has been completed, so I think that would become much better for the in terms of the patient's experience. So moving on to the next startup. So the next startup that we'll be talking about is Satlio Labs. So Satlio Labs has raised approximately 3.3 million from Mirac Ventures, Huddle Ventures, and GVFL.
Yeah. So as Kulmani was talking about how uh, a good way to have a startup is enter a niche industry, have validation and proof of your concept, and then move on to the broader segment, right? Satvio Labs is actually an Ahmedabad-based startup that operates at the intersection of something that we can call space technology, a bit of AI, a bit of data science, and they're aiming to harness data for innovative applications, which I'll come to later. Now, before going to Satvio Labs, I want to deep dive into a brief history of space tech or the space industry in general. If you know, in the early years in 1960s, 70s, 80s, even till mid 2000s, the space industry, specifically space technology, shuttles and rockets and launches, it was not privatized. It was highly nationalized in the sense it was under a government body, like NASA of USA, JAXA of Japan, and ISRO of India, right? There was a very big barrier, which was the entry cost. And when you think of space industry, the first thing that comes to your mind is launch cost, because to go into space, you need to be there, right? You need to go through a shuttle or rocket to do something, to have satellites over there. Now, this talks about the progressively decreasing launch or something called payload cost of satellites and rockets to a region beyond Earth called LEO, lower Earth orbit. This is the region where satellites actually frequent around and orbit around the Earth. Okay, so this is cost of space launches to low Earth orbit, or its abbreviation is LEO. So in 1962, the cost of space launch was between $25,000 to $100,000, sorry, per kilogram. So if you're sending something like a 100 kilo payload or substance to LEO, it would cost you around $1 million. And that time, private companies would really afford to, put money into these kind of ventures where they could afford to put a satellite carrying 100 kilograms into space for $1 million. That was huge sum of money, right? Over time, what has happened is that the average cost of payload launch has come down. By 1990s, if you look at the chart, it has dropped down to almost an average cost of 10 to $15,000 per kg. However, it was not until the advent of private companies like SpaceX that we saw the actual drop in the cost to sub $5,000 per kg area. If you look at the bottom right chart, Falcon Heavy, that's a flagship shuttle of SpaceX. And for the past 3 to 4 years, the average payload cost has been below $1,500 per kg. That's a huge 98 to 19% drop in the last 50 years. Now, what has happened in the industry is that the one of the barriers of entry was high cost of payload launches, right? That has come down, and that has happened due to mainly billionaires such as Jeff Bezos, who owns Blue Origin, and Elon Musk, who owns SpaceX, coming into the market and reducing the payload cost. This has allowed, along with a good momentum in shift from government bodies to privatization of space industry over the last decade, from 2010 to 2025, has been seen a lot of VC investment into this industry. Now, this somehow reminds me of Moore's law, which is actually applicable to computers. That as you keep using it, the price goes down, and proportionally the power goes up, the computing power. I'm not saying Moore's law is applicable over here, but we can see a clear trend that the average price is going down, which means you can carry more payload with the same rocket and at a cheaper cost over time. You would not believe that companies such as SpaceX and Blue Origin are planning to take down the cost to almost below $500 per kg into space. That is insane to think about, even 10, 20 years back. So this was mainly possible due to privatization of space tech companies. And now we come back to the current scenario. What's happening in the space industry across the globe? The global space sector is undergoing a significant transformation, notably marked by a shift in government priorities and increased private sector participation. To give you an example, if you have heard the news that recently US is seeing a major NASA budget cut, almost by $6 billion, which is 25, almost a quarter percentage of a quarter part of NASA's budget. And that money is being shifted to private companies like SpaceX for Mars missions and other missions. A lot of the experts believe that private companies are much more efficient with the usage of money. They're able to channelize the money into more smaller programs, which are commercially more viable. Initially, when NASA and JAXA and ISRO is still developing a lot, but NASA did missions, it was more towards experimentation R&D. Right now, it has come towards the commercialization stage. So when we come to commercialization, we come back to the push from governments. They believe that privatization of space industry, space tech, will give them benefits. And that is where we see even India is pushing towards the same thing. They're not behind USA, they're not behind China and other countries. India's $44 billion space push recently, which is almost 1,000 crore fund to back startups, was launched last year. The government believes that it will empower the startups by providing them money as well as expertise, and they want the startups in India to go behind space tech. One of the best examples is actually the state of Gujarat. If you notice where this SatLeo's lab is based out of, it's in Ahmedabad, which is in Gujarat, and Gujarat is one of the only state in India which has a space tech policy which came out last month, 2025 to 2030 space tech policy. What they're doing is they're providing a lot of funding as well as strategic help, as well as a lot of rebates to the space tech companies that are coming out in India. So to all the space enthusiasts in India who want to have a startup in the industry, go for it. You can look at all the upcoming government policies since 2024. Government is supporting all of you right now. Now coming back to the actual company, Satlio Labs. It's an early stage in I think in funding of $3.3 million. It's not very big, but it's an early stage to like have a proof of concept ready for launching mini satellites to LEO. And what Satlio Labs technology is designed to serve is critical industries. For example, agriculture, where they will be detecting any early crop stress, optimizing water use, monitoring, predicting crop yields. And these LEO satellites are not something path-breaking. It's been used in the countries in the West. Startups like Planet Labs, like Aurora Tech, have actually been funded, and they are doing very good revenue. It's already there. It's not nothing like mind-breaking, but it's the first Indians, I think probably the one of the first few Indian startups to go into space tech, especially satellite imaging of the Earth, thermal imaging. And yeah, it's a proof of concept that has been validated in the West, and the revenues are good. The usage is good. It can be used in defense segment for delivering thermal intelligence for surveillance in the borders. It can be used for mapping urban heat islands, monitoring environmental degradation, providing real-time alerts for wildfires. And if I'm correct, I was reading somewhere that SatLeo Lab has actually a letter of intent for almost $25 million. So if the prototype works out, they have business in the pipeline. It's about just validating their products in the space, which is not a tough thing. It's already there. A lot of startups are doing outside India. So it's a very interesting industry. The government is supporting it. Um, the government wants you to have, that's why they're giving out funds and a lot of schemes are there. So yeah, that's that. And what do you guys think about it, like about space tech industry, about the space industry in India?
I think huge potential, right? Uh, Given the circumstances, over last 2 weeks, space tech has really given us the edge to, triangulate a lot of things which are being thrown our way. So thanks to ISRO and DRDO, and because they were the only ones who were doing, and ISC to some extent, building those kind of technology. So I would say this segment is pretty much open for the private sector. Even last week, you saw, um, some CEOs giving statements that government had actually called, all the defense manufacturers to Delhi for a meeting in the midst of this.
Mm,
So you saw Bharat Forge, Baba Kalyani gave that statement that I'm going, all the CEOs have been called to Delhi. So I think space tech overall will play a very important role, in strategic sectors like defense, but also in key sectors like agriculture, manufacturing, um, even let's say something as basic as monsoon, right? That has a huge impact on India's GDP,
mm.
right? Um, so applications are multiple. I was also discussing with someone a few weeks ago about waste which is being collected or accumulating in space, and there are people who are building startup to collect because
Space
those,
debris, yes, yes. To
yeah,
collect the
every
space
week
debris.
keeps,
Yeah,
yeah, it just keeps rotating. So and I was joking, that humans have, actually not only polluted Earth, but also in space we have like dumped some kind of debris there.
a lot
So
apparently, a lot.
interesting. So interesting, and good to see people backing these kind of ventures at early stage, right? I would like to see more such investments, and some of the fundamentals of VC may not even apply here. Like you cannot be asset light in this kind of business if you are a EV company or you know, building space tech, manufacturing some of the equipment which is used for space. Um, so a different kind of mindset is required versus funding a consumer business. So I'm not sure at early stage what kind of investors exist at this point, but I would like them to be thinking about these sectors where is huge value creation potential. This goes back to Piyush Goyal's statement about, making ice creams and tasty cookies versus investing into deep tech and sectors where, there is huge potential, but it requires patient capital. So he was right in some ways that not everybody has to invest only in consumer brands. There are enough sectors of, you know, outside consumer brands, ed tech, fashion, enough sectors where value creation potential is huge and largely untapped. Um, so many white spaces like this. Happy to see investment in this and also other sectors, let's say something like agriculture, which were largely untouched. Let's say if I go 10 years back, before 2015, if we just track how many deals were happening in agriculture, but it's strategically very important for our country, right?
Hmm.
So I'm excited to see the next wave. Let's see how it happens. And then I'm sure some of these companies will also do global collaborations, other things. I think space tech will also, you will see some kind of alignment of countries where countries may only collaborate with certain kind of countries, right?
I think interesting because there is no space law, right? If you go outside and you get something, only USA and Luxembourg, if I'm correct, maybe Singapore is coming up with space law. None of the other countries have space laws, which means if you get something, a rocket, a comet, or whatever, like part of a asteroid, it's yours. But in USA, if you do something like depending on the classification of whatever you bring, it could either be company's property or it could be government's property because they have a space law over there. So very interesting to see how the laws will also apply in the coming years to make the industry more refined.
Correct. So we'll keep discussing similar deals. Maybe this is one of the themes we can deep dive into in one of the episodes. Just look at what has happened in space tech over last 5 years and what kind of companies have been funded and who has funded them. So
Hmm.
maybe that's something we can explore in future.
So the next startup, basically a theme which we'll be discussing about, is the AI-based startups emerging as a global trend and how the Indian startups are also building their own. So we'll be discussing about Posha. So Posha has raised approximately 8 million from Exceed Ventures and Waterbridge Ventures. So what Posha does is that it is a AI driven, basically a kitchen. They provide kitchen robots that autonomously cooks meals by adding ingredients, do stirring and adjusting the heat using real time analysis. So they have included approximately 1,000 customizable recipes, and what they're doing is that they're bringing robotics its own ChatGPT moment in the Indian kitchen. So adding on to this, so Y Combinator released its 2025 request for startups list 5 days ago, and this startup falls under one of those criterias. So Posha is a good example of a full stack AI startup with also a leap in consumer robotics, which directly aligns with YC's push for smarter AI powered automations in everyday life. So it is one of those startups which is trying to replace the human touch and focus majorly on activities which cannot be done by robotics. So one of the other startups which we will be discussing about is Cult. So Cult raised approximately 20 million from angel investors and from the venture capitalists. So Cult is a AI powered beauty tech platform. So what it does is that it provides hyper personalized skincare recommendations using AI and insights from over 300 global professionals. And what it does is that based on your unique skin attributes, which includes your tone, any type of structures which you have on your skin. So basis that, it provides and creates products for youth. So if you see on this website, so it's designers as a founder. So what it means is that um, Cult embodies the designer as a founder theme by prioritizing user first design, deep personalization, and using AI business models to redefine how beauty is discovered in India.
No, I'm just thinking of a recent conversation which Gary Tan, who is the current serving CEO of Y Combinator, had with Shane Parrish. I think it was on 29th April. They released that episode. I was listening to him how they're looking at AI, right? How they're allocating. Um, so some interesting, insights that he had, that we are not far from a startup which will be probably 4 or 5 people company and doing $1 million in ARR because of AI, enabling that. And those things will be interesting, in future you have just limited manpower and mostly they have those portfolio companies already with YC. What YC is betting on is these companies will mature and then VCs will pick on these companies, right? So ultimately, it gives us a signal what a growth stage funding is going to look like in 2 3 years from now. I mean, 25% of their companies go to Series A after 5 years because they're backing 19, 20, 21 years old and they take time. The rest 75% go to Series A very quickly, right? So it gives an indication um, globally uh, how much of it's frothy market, how much it's real. Um, I would say AI overall is a huge shift. Somebody like, and Gary also mentioned in the episode, Sam Altman has probably fast forwarded the whole tech curve by at least 10 years or 15 years, right? With this AI boom. And it will be interesting because I'm also more excited about how the legacy companies are going to react to it. Like a large part of Microsoft's market cap is currently coming from their investment in OpenAI and how successful is OpenAI. I would be excited to see how Meta builds and what they build because they have a lot of consumer facing platforms with them. And Nvidia, obviously, Nvidia is this is from the legacy side. So these three players. But on the overall AI investments in India, I'm yet to meet businesses which have scaled on the revenue side. They have raised funding, that's okay, over last 2 years. But I'm still to see some case studies, okay, people having raised few $1 million and then also built revenue or P&L, right? So some of these large language models, how do they? So ultimately, I think for me, it's user experience, and then somebody should be willing to pay at the end of it, even if you're solving something, right?
I think I have a take on this. If you talked about the legacy companies, right? They have the resources, the talent, and probably a lot of things in the favor, which makes it possible for them to create the base level deep AI LLMs. And what I'm noticing in the market is that there are two, three kinds of, I think, I'm not an expert, but what I'm seeing right now is that there are LLM based companies, the deep AI companies, and then there are LLM wrappers, something like Perplexity AI. It is built on an LLM, which is, I think, OpenAI, right? So, in from Indian perspective, to make a deep AI company which is based on LLM, something like a big company can do it. It will be difficult for a small team to do it. But as you discussed, we might see 4 or 5 member team coming to a huge ARR in the coming months or years. That might be more possible from an AI company that is actually an LLM wrapper like Perplexity AI, something that is built on a LLM model language. They're providing instructions to it, they're getting the data back and providing in a package format with a good UI UX to the consumer. Because I've not seen a deep AI company in India till now.
Yeah, so the reason why we don't have that is um, we don't have that patient capital. So if you look at any kind of deep tech which has been built, let's take AI, right? Where did AI originate? AI originated in, on university campuses in the early days, which is largely funded by the US government, taxpayers' dollars, right? Which is in form of grants for that research, etc. If you go back to 70s and even before that, when rudimentary AI models or ML models emerged, they were in the university labs, right? So basically, it is subsidized patient capital, which is available for these labs. And some of these institutions have, let's say Harvard probably receiving billions of dollars per year, right? Which was also a discussion with the Trump administration recently. So do we have that kind of patient capital available at, going into labs and deep technical research? That is the question we need to ask ourselves, right? It's not going to be,
Mm,
just startup founders. The commercialization arm of the labs can do this startup bit, but the other deep work has to be done inside the lab. So there is actual lab and there is the commercialization arm of that
mm,
lab, right? So there is an OpenAI lab, and then commercializing this is a separate endeavor altogether, right? But the lab bit requires a patient capital, which Microsoft is providing them or other investors are providing them. Do we have those kind of investors, maybe TCS or Infosys or Wipro? Um, some of them are also investors into OpenAI, right? But why can't they fund something in India where we have this patient capital? Maybe we commit $100 billion or $200 billion, right? Facebook for your maybe has committed already 50 billion plus to AI related initiatives, right? Um, so we are talking huge, deep pool of capital, subsidized without asking questions on IRR and
mm,
MOIC, and then you can probably build something like this, right? So I think we are a little bit away. It will be probably public plus private coming together and doing it. That's how else do you think Silicon Valley was developed? It was not capitalists who built it. This was built as a government initiative, as a project, building that city, building the whole ecosystem, bringing companies, bringing university campuses, bringing those labs to those campuses. And that's how Silicon Valley was built, right? I don't think we have that kind of vision at city level. So the closest we have is Bangalore, but I don't see any talk of building a specific campus for deep tech or technical research or labs, right? So currently, it's the mindset is very very different. We'll need to allocate some significant money. I'm counting on established players like Infi, Wipro, TCS,
mm,
consortium of those players who can actually commit 500 million or even more than that, right? Um, IISC, for example, people may not know was developed by Tata Group and then it was adopted by the government. So it was Mr. Tata who gave the check for IISC and set up as a private institute. So we need to do something similar for AI, and which can give us, if we have some indigenous models, right, it can give us a lot of competitive edge. So the way you can think about the geopolitical alignment around AI, there will be allies countries who will be aligning with US companies, either relying on OpenAI and NVIDIA for hardware, but there will also be other countries will be building around China, other access which will develop, right? So it will be similar to any other technology which has been a multiplier. Let's say electricity, early days there was a AC current and DC current and people having opposite views. Similarly, with internet, we had early adopters, late adopters, and then people, and then dollars. Same money, technology. Money is also technology. So AI, I think, just coming back to your question, we don't have that deep, patient pool of capital to be committed. We are not talking about 1 billion, 2 billion. We're talking about hundreds of billions which have to be committed
Mm.
without any, a lot of pressure on returns. That is the kind of pool of capital we are talking about. And that's what gives US the edge, because these companies, the tech companies which are there, they have the balance sheet to do that. And when it comes to their national interest, obviously they are going to be aligning with American national interest, right? We should not be any doubt, uh,
Mm.
right? And some of the companies have made it very clear that we are a tech company, but we are an American tech company. So when it comes to serving US interests, it's going to be number one priority, right? That's how we should think, right? And so we need to have similar institutions here locally.
So let's move on to the next startup. So the next startup that we'll be talking about is Propelled. So Propelled has raised approximately 30 million from Westbridge Capital and Stellaris Venture Partners. So what they do is that they provide collateral-free education loan through study now, pay later products and income sharing agreements via their NBFC arm.
Yeah, and what is beautiful is that they focus on Bharat, so their focus is on tier two, tier three towns in India, where the access to financing for education is not as convenient. If you have been to a branch of PSU Bank in tier two, tier three town, it's an experience in itself. I recommend you do it once you're traveling outside if you're living in a metro city, right? I think there is a huge demand for this, for education loans. Um, and I think they may be sort of strengthening their balance sheet because they're an NBFC per se. If I just go back, because I have personally witnessed the evolution of this market, like getting an education loan probably around 2005 was a very different ball game. It was not possible at all. So happy to see these players doing it. Buy now, pay later, just a high level observation. I don't think it has worked well in other segments in India for shopping, etc., etc. Globally, also, I don't think buy now, pay later has been that successful. I remember Square, which is the fintech based out of US, the founder of Twitter had another startup which was called Square, I think, right? Square. Later, it was called Block. Uh, they acquired probably 7, 8 years back a large company in Australia for BNPL, spent millions of billions of dollars, and that didn't amount to anything. So, but in this segment, because there is a demand for uh, you know loans without collateral, because students per se don't have any assets. So I think this will work out, right? I think this space is still open for play. So a lot of new players will be probably entering this market because tier two, tier three, and the number of colleges, institutions, private institutions which are coming up, their fees will also be, well, it's not going to be comparable to top eight cities. So in top eight cities, if you're going to a tier two, tier three MBA school, if it is 20 lakhs, then in probably tier two, tier three towns, it's going to be anywhere between 5 to 10 lakhs, right, for your MBA or a professional degree. I'm not talking about BA, etc., etc. But as more businesses build up in those cities, there will be demand for local talent, right? People graduating from these colleges. So I see a use case for this, and I'm happy that there are people who are coming up with clear thesis that we will be giving student loans and giving it in tier two and tier three towns.
So the next startup that we'll be talking about is Store My Goods. So Store My Goods has raised approximately $500,000 from Jito Incubation and Innovation Foundation.
Mhm. Thank you, Vatsal. It's a very Western thing that began where people used to shift between cities or within the city and they would store not at their homes, unlike where we do it in India, but they used to store at a proper storage facility. They used to be given a 10 by 10 square meter area where you can store the stuff for X amount of dollars per month, and you could come back to it. You could lose it for months or years. When I look at store my goods, something similar pops up to my mind, and it's a Noida-based tech-enabled storage solution startup. As Vatsal said, it raised $500,000, but it's a part of an ongoing $1 million growth investment stage. So they're raising a total of $1 million. They've completed $500,000, and the investment is coming from Cheeto Incubation and Innovation Foundation (JIIF), as well as several family-based offices, and they're prominent family offices. That means a lot of family offices have invested and are planning to invest in the ongoing round of Store My Goods. It's not an early stage, it's a growth stage because they have their businesses in five main cities: Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai. If I'm correct, two more cities are Hyderabad and Pune. Cities which have high density, cities which the land property prices are growing, where earlier if you could afford a second house and store at a cheaper place, you don't have that luxury anymore. So what they're doing is in this ever-growing vertical cities where the prices of properties are very high, they're coming up with storage spaces and a very high-tech enabled storage space, just like using an app. If you want to have a certain storage space, you can rent it out, and it comes at affordable cost. And as per the owners who came on Shark Tank in 2021, he said that our goal is to make storage as accessible and seamless as booking a cab or ordering food. Sudhi Gupta also said that we are building a future where no one has to worry about space, which is quite true in India where population is growing and the space is the city. Even though city is expanding, horizontally, still the prices of lands and the rent, the office spaces are going up. What's interesting is that it shows a validation of consumer change in consumer behavior. Like urban consumers are increasingly open to using professional storage services, moving away from traditional solutions of selling your goods while shifting or paying someone like Agarwal Packers and Movers 5 lakh, 4 lakhs to shift. Instead of doing that or keeping in the family houses, they are using the storage spaces. So it's a change in consumer behavior also. And it's a small and steady validation of the concept. What's interesting is that they're getting the fund to expand into tier two cities. So the next round is very important because the money they will be using is basically for hiring a leadership team, making the tech solid, and also growing into the tier two cities. If the concept has a proof of validation in tier two cities, then we can get a very good indicator that there's a huge change in consumer behavior in terms of storage spaces. Like the trust is growing to third-party services. And this is not only a B2C or B2C, it's also a B2B. They're also giving out the storage spaces to other businesses, which is interesting because the surge in e-commerce and online businesses, especially for mid-sized e-commerce businesses where they can't afford to have a huge storage space, they can keep their flow of goods and make it go through something like Store My Goods. Um, Businesses increasingly use self-storage for inventory and logistics management. And as they see cost-effective measures and scalable warehousing, I think this ties into the new narrative in India, which is putting money into storage, warehousing, logistics, if I'm correct, right? So this ties into that narrative and pretty interesting startup. Yep.
So moving on to the next startup, which is Metafin. So Metafin has raised approximately $10 million from Vertex Ventures, uh, Northern Arc, and AU Small Finance Bank.
Right. This is again building for Bharat, the second startup today, which is Metafin. Um, Metafin is basically giving loans for solar panels and setting up, clean energy. It's kind of a clean energy theme. I think they are right now in Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, Chhattisgarh. I mean, That's where they're planning to expand. They are maybe already present in these states. They provide financing for solar projects, largely for rural part of India, right? And they are targeting states which have underserved in terms of clean energy, large population base, and large agriculture base. These are the kind of states they are targeting. So Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, these definitely make sense. If you go to a bank, let's say in tier three, tier four, usually you have this large genset which is outside the bank in case there's a power cut for 4 hours, 5 hours. You can run this genset. Even at domestic level, you may find people running diesel-based gensets and other sources of energy. So prima facie, and even for agriculture, right? For irrigation, largely we are using diesel-based in cases where tube wells are not available. Largely, it's driven by diesel. So diesel demand is actually not in urban; it's in agriculture and the rural part of India. That's where the diesel demand comes from. In addition to our thermal power plants, etc., where we need to burn diesel and generate electricity, right? So the clean energy use case is already there. I think this will be backed by the asset itself. So it will be loan against the asset, which will be the solar small unit or plant which you're setting up. Um, and I think currently they are operating in UP, Bihar, Jharkhand, and the states which I mentioned before, which is MP, Odisha, and Chhattisgarh, where they want to penetrate by 2030. Um, so far, they have financed more than 3,500 solar projects across 2.5 thousand or 2,500 villages. So they don't only provide financing and installation, they also track. They have a proprietary IoT platform through which they track the maintenance, etc., for these platforms, right? And so from sustainability point of view, it's a no-brainer, right? For clean energy and the overall carbon footprint. What they also do when to assess the credit worthiness, right? So now underwriting becomes very crucial in this, right? Because you are going to a very far-flung area and dispersing the loan there. So underwriting is not that CIBIL देख के आपने loan दे दिया. It's not that easy. Underwriting in rural, even for agricultural loan, underwriting is very different, right? So what they're trying to do is some kind of physical approach where they really touch every customer physically and check the physical installation, right? And that's how they're able to make sure that the lending is done correctly and the underwriting is appropriate, right? So in those areas, those parts of India, you can still not do only digital footprint based lending. You need to physically go that the panel has been installed. This is the person who we have lent the money to, and this is working. And then you track through your IoT. Then, if maintenance is required, there is uptime with this panel or not. So it's not that one of those fintech models where you put 100 million and then it just scales on laptops and mobile phones. This is very different way of building business. So this physical model is unique to rural. You still need to go down and figure out where the asset is going to be installed. But overall, I think clean energy plus use case under penetration use case can be at the household level, can be for irrigation, can be for other small units. I've seen irrigation motors run on solar panels, which do well. Obviously, the output per minute of the water coming from the ground is lower versus the electricity motor, but then again, you don't have to pay any electricity bills and the maintenance is much lower, right? Let's see. I'm hopeful that more such startups will come up to capture solar, especially in this belt, right? In North India, you have good sunlight coverage, right? The Bihar, UP, Rajasthan, Haryana, you don't have, and even Gujarat to an extent, you don't have that much problem with the solar panels running during the daytime. This is the peak time for irrigation, by the way. summer months in because if you are doing sugarcane, let's say in North India, this is the peak season where you have to go to every field and put water every 10 days, 15 days because the temperature hits 40-45 degrees to sustain the crop.
Yeah, I think I'm a bit biased because I stay in one of the highest per capita income states, which is Gujarat. And when I look out of my window, I can see 90% of the homes have solar panels. So it's a proof of concept is established. And what they're doing is they're targeting the areas where there's very low penetration of solar panels, right, in terms of using electricity. So it's a natural flow that probably a lot of homes here I see almost every home, not commercial buildings though, but almost every home has a solar panel roof on top, and they save a lot of money on the summers. But as you said, the issue will come when you go to the villages and you have to make sure that it's installed because it's very tough to have due diligence on those in those areas, especially.
Correct. So thank you everyone for joining. We will add some useful links to the reading material. I think Samir, me, and Vatsal, all of us will put some link in the description also. So in case you want to refer to any of the podcast, any of the let's say the Kaizen material for healthcare, which we refer to, you can always go and check it out. Um, Please share this with investors and founders in your network who may be interested in learning what is happening in the startup ecosystem on a bi-weekly basis. So we'll keep meeting every 15 days or so and discuss these large trends. So thank you for joining us. Please subscribe and share our content. Thank you.